welcome back to Cosmic Comics. I was going to divide this episode up, but decided to make a full go of it. Today I'm going to take a look at the early appearances of the character Korvac and follow him through his first major story arc. I've done one other episode which featured Korvac. If you would like to watch me discuss his first appearance, please check out my video on the Grand Master versus the Prime Mover. We get to begin this journey with Thor Volume 1, Annual Number 6, published in 1977. The story begins with a smiling god of thunder soaring over New York City. All at once, he has to respond to a terrorist situation whereby 6 armed men are attempting to activate a nuclear reactor inside Roxxon Nucleonics. Thor easily thwarts their plan, but as he's mopping up the mess, the reactor begins to glow. Afraid that it's going to blow up, Thor rushes in to try and stop it. What Thor doesn't know is that the reactor is being stolen by a time teleportation device. Thor is swept up in a crackle of energy. The cops are glad to see the terrorist threat under control, but fear the worst for Thor. Thor has been transported to what looks like a large lab, and we're given several clues as to what's going on right off the bat. For starters, there is a large clock hanging in the air with a reading of X-, and the shadowy, legless figure immediately put off by the fact that his time probe picked up a passenger. Neither Thor nor the figure in the shadows recognize each other right away, but our man of mystery has the upper hand as his computer is capable of telling him who our blonde-haired hero is. With a click of a button, the mystery man goes on the attack. Thor easily dispatches the first line of attack and is upset about being attacked without provocation. With another click of a button, Thor is transported into deep space. Now, I know I've seen Thor traverse his way through space more than once, but this time the icy cold of space wins out, and soon the god of thunder floats unconscious. This is one of those things that seems to have changed depending on the author, along with such facts as how long can Thor hold his breath underwater. The story now shifts over to the original Guardians of the Galaxy. Since the last time I covered this group, they have picked up a new member of their crew, Nikki, sole survivor of the planet Mercury, who spent years alone in a spaceship after the Badoon wiped out the rest of the humans on her planet. Outside of the ship, the one who knows, Starhawk, glides along beside his companions. All seems normal until a power beam strikes the ship head-on. Nikki attempts to maintain control while an inboard relay bank breaks loose. A fast-thinking Vance Astro stops it from tumbling to the ground with a bolt of psychokinetic force. Charlie 27 attempts to help, but is threatened by a number of high-voltage cables. Yondo then directs his arrow, which can change direction in midair in answer to its master's whistle, to tie up the cables. Martin X then jumps in to weld everything back in place, and comments on what a good little team they've become. Seriously, I love this opening. That's exactly how I feel every time I read this, and it puts a smile on my face. But as Vance is quick to point out, where is Starhawk? He's outside doing his part for the team and has been helping stabilize the ship from outside. Once the ship is in the clear, he steps onto a small pad and is transported inside of the ship. Vance gets all uppity and demands that Starhawk tell them what's going on. We're told that the ship ran into some sort of power beam, but the ship was nowhere near its focal point. If they had been, the ship and crew would have been disintegrated. The whole party jumps into action and is ready to start guarding the galaxy. The Guardians start following the beam back to its point of origin, but their pursuit doesn't go unnoticed. Once again, the shadowy figure is ready to shut down any possible opposition with the push of a button. Space debris starts heading towards the Freedom's Liberty from every direction. Marty's quick maneuvering saves the ship from what seems certain doom. The one who knows insists that he knows that the meteor storm was directed at them. Without consulting the others, he insists on scouting the situation out. While flying ahead, Starhawk happens upon what appears to be an interesting ice sculpture. Instead of finishing his investigation, Starhawk returns to the ship with his sparkling space treasure. It appears as though the crew all stand around and watch Thor thaw out. At the last possible moment, Vance remembers who this is, and Thor comes to and verifies Vance's assertion. Oh boy. Chapter 3. And the villain is finally out of the shadows and surrounded by lackeys. 4 of these characters we have seen before in Giant-Sized Defenders, Volume 1, Issue number 3, in the Grandmaster's Contest against Prime Mover. It's now clear that Korvac is our man who was in the shadows and the one running the show. He tells the reptilian Tehu to double-check their screens for the starship, and it quickly becomes apparent that although Korvac may be leading the show, his crew doesn't necessarily get along and play like a team. Grot, the Manslayer, mocks Tehu as he heads back to his console, which earns the telekinetic Grun a quick swipe of the tail. This comes close to an all-out brawl with Grot blasting back. Brawl, making fun of reptoids, Torque, the turtle-like creature, taking offense to that and lashing out at Brawl, Dumog, the blob, stepping in to hold Torque in place. Korvac then calls for all of them to cut it out, and screams at them about how he won't allow for any dissension in the ranks. Korvac must have done some heavy stuff to get these boys to calm down so fast, because immediately the crew goes silent. A silence that is broken by Dumog asking if maybe Korvac could just explain exactly what it is they're doing. And now it's time for some exposition. Surprisingly, Korvac tells them that and more. He starts with his job before the Badoon invasion as a computer techno. When the Badoon invaded Earth 8 years prior, Korvac betrayed his people and collaborated with the enemy. Due to his technical prowess, he soon found himself in charge of analytical systems for entire planets. Eventually, the Badoon drove him to the point of exhaustion, and one day he collapsed on a control panel. Instead of killing him off, the Badoon grafted Korvac into a special systems module, essentially making him half man, half machine, all cyborg. Unfortunately for the Badoon, Korvac was now capable of thinking faster, and he soon used this newfound intelligence to overpower his masters. Korvac's plans to destroy the Badoon Brotherhood were cut short when the Grand Master kidnapped him across time and forced him to play in his contest against Doctor Strange. It appeared that Doctor Strange had won the contest with a simple punch, but this move was a calculated loss by Korvac, as it gave him an opportunity to scan and then synthesize a portion of the Grand Master's energies. Yes, it reads as though Korvac can synthesize the power cosmic. And this is the moment where we should all begin to realize that this guy has the potential to turn into a real threat. After the games, Korvac was returned to the 31st century, where he began using his intellect and newfound power to turn a barren planetoid into his own technological haven he named Wonderland. Next, Korvac sent out probes across space and time and began amassing objects of power and 5 lackeys to serve as his lieutenants in his empire. You can tell all his lackeys are like, what the? Korvac gets his constipation face on and claims to be ready to rule the galaxy and extract revenge on all who have denied him power in the past. He plans to build a paradise where the elites of the universe will flock to him and worship him as a god. We now see for the first time that all of this is taking place on a planet, because up to now, I thought for sure, looking at just the comic, that they were in a spaceship. Anyway, Korvac is sending out a beam to siphon the energy from the Earth's sun. He's doing this to ensure that when the beam strikes, it'll cause the Earth's sun to go nova, destroy his homeworld Earth, and then return the power he siphoned back, and power up all the cool gadgets he has. I'd maybe go with using a different sun, powering up my gadgets, and then attacking Earth, but that's just me. And now we get to learn what the big X- clock is about. In 2 hours, the clock will strike 0, and he'll get revenge on his home planet. If he hates Earth so much, why is he still using Earth time? And secondly, dude, you were the one who betrayed your people when the Badoon showed up. Anyway, his villainous rant is cut short by Tehu interrupting him to tell him that the starship has returned. Meanwhile, back on the Freedom's Lady, Vance is getting giddy about having an actual god on board. Martin X is skeptical, but it's Yondu who casts the deciding vote of sorts by offering up his bow. Thor handles this delicate situation like it's the kind of thing he does all the time. In fact, he seems far more concerned about the fact that he's far in the future. Nikki's already feeling the poor guy up and has to be pulled off by Charlie while Vance attempts to excuse their behavior. After introductions all around, it's time to get down to hero stuff. Starhawk insists that the team and Thor's passage through time are connected, but they still don't have a clue as to who is behind this or what they are trying to accomplish. As their ship approaches a small planet, Corvac has his lackeys activate their defenses. 3 drones are attacking the ship. Martin X puts the entire ship on autopilot and the entire crew takes off to the teleporter. Their ship retreats while the 7 heroes are teleported to the planet below. The crew is shocked by the advanced city they appear within. They don't have long to take it in as the threats begin right away. And we all saw this coming, didn't we? The lackeys, lieutenants, stand ready to fight. Thor and Skyhawk take off to put a stop to the beam and find Korvac while the rest of the team prepares for a fight. A 5 versus 5 battle. At the start of our fight, our heroes pick uneven matchups. Charlie is swiped by Tehu's tail. Yondu's arrow is plucked from the air by Dumog. Martin X is the victim of Grog's telekinetic blast. Nikki's guns are useless against Torque's shell, and Brawl becomes intangible when faced with one of Vance's psychic blast. Marty is the first to notice that he's outmatched and switch strategies. He decides that if he's going to be taken down, the least he can do is help a team member on his way out. So he freezes Dumog solid with a burst of cold. Now that Yondu can freely shoot arrows, he uses the vibrations of an arrow to disrupt Brawl's ability to become intangible. Vance turns his attention to helping Charlie, whom he assists. Charlie then steps in to help Nikki by pummeling Torque through a wall. At this point, it's basically a 5-on-1 battle. All the same, Grodd is ready to stand up to our remaining heroes and reminds them that he once took down the Hulk as in the previously mentioned giant-sized defenders. Nikki, having never heard of the Hulk, remains unimpressed and puts an end to Grodd's tough guy act by shooting off his antenna. With the source of his power gone, Grodd takes off running, stating that it'll take a year for his antenna to grow back. Our heroes don't waste any time moving forward to locate Thor and Starhawk. Let's take a look at what happened to those two while the rest of the team was fighting. Thor and Starhawk burst into Korvac's lair. He's surprised to see Thor return. Korvac feels the need to tell our heroes, who still have no idea what Korvac is scheming, that his plan can't be stopped because there's only an hour and 15 minutes left on his giant clock. He could have just been chill and maybe talked his way out of this one until the clock rolls down, but no, Korvac has to tell them that when the clock strikes 0, that the Earth's sun will go nova. Enraged, our heroes charge forward, but there's a sudden flash of energy. A moment later, Starhawk and Thor find themselves having been teleported outside. Wow, there has been a lot of teleportation in this issue. It didn't work the first time, but our 2 heroes go running right back in, and again find themselves outside, but the jig is up. Starhawk knows. He has seen a pattern in the machinery, an indicator light that glows each time they get transported outside. Thor does his Thor thing and uses his hammer to break the machine, angering Korvac in the process, who threatens that he has plenty more weapons at his disposal. We know this isn't going to stop the heroes, who are all like, bring it, while running in. Korvac throws up an energy field, and now it's Starhawk's time to shine as he uses his energy burst to bring it down. I love that as Korvac gets angry, that he starts to pout about Wonderworld getting ruined. Seemingly cornered, Korvac goes on the offense once again. This time he attacks with energy beams, which Thor stops with his hammer. Korvac remains undeterred, and shows that he still has his eye on them. He blasts them both with a strange light from his empty eye socket. He struck them with a neural beam that forces the 2 of them to fight each other. What could go wrong there? How about a sleep ray instead? That sounds pretty effective. Or why not send Thor back into space? It had solid results before. We can now see that the clock has gone all the way from 1:15 down to 15. This whole fight scene has taken an hour. Really? An hour? As the two titans rush each other, they continue to try and find a way out of their predicament. Each recognizes that they cannot stop the battle. Their answer? Go at each other full force in an effort to destroy Wonderland. Starhawk and Thor go to town. It's billed as a battle between man-like god and godlike man. We're told it's the battle of mythos versus super science. But all we truly get to see are several panels of our heroes facing off head-to-head. And in the final panel, both heroes miss their opponent with their attack. As the battle finally begins to rage in earnest, Corvac's lair begins to fall apart. With the roof coming down on his head, Korvac teleports away, and as he leaves, both Thor and Starhawk regain their senses. Starhawk can't shut the machine down, so Thor steps in and does his Thor thing to the machine. With 1 minute remaining, the Earth has been saved. The two take a moment to admire their handiwork. Starhawk then takes control of the teleportation device and without asking sends Thor back to his own time. The rest of our heroes approach the building from the ground outside as it begins to collapse. At the last moment, Starhawk flies to safety and then reports that the threat of Korvac has ended. The rest of the Guardians seem bummed that they didn't get to say goodbye to Thor. Meanwhile, Thor and the nuclear reactor have returned through time, shocking the cops and the crime scene with their sudden appearance. Thor then saunters outside and thinks back on his adventures. The story of Korvac continues sprinkled across an 11-issue arc of the Avengers, starting in Avengers Volume 1, Issue 167. Some quick filler on the Guardians of the Galaxy. Even before Thor Annual number 6, the Guardians of the Galaxy had located and basically come into possession of the abandoned Federation starship yard named Drydock. Nick Fury calls the Avengers in to investigate when Drydock appears in a near-Earth orbit without warning. After the expected initial confusion, both teams are shaking hands and getting along great. The Guardians then recount their experiences of Thor Annual 6. We also learn that afterwards the Guardians continue to track Korvac down. They located his lair, but Korvac escaped once more. Due to his hasty retreat, Korvac left a few clues within a scorched compu memory core, whereby Martinex discovered a star chart for the late 1970s Earth, which as everybody knows is a significant period in Earth's history. Because of science and comic books, Marty was capable of converting the entirety of the Drydock's warp drive into a time machine. Yup, that's how they got here. And here's what they think Korvac's plan is. He's come back to late 1970s Earth to kill Vance Astrovic as a child, and thus ensure that the Guardians of the Galaxy are never founded. Mind you that this plotline is before the Terminator or Back to the Future. Iron Man and the Avengers are on board to help. We get a great panel from Major Astrovic talking about the dangers of having two of him on Earth at the same time. This from the man who told his entire life story and the history of his world to young Vance the one time he got to meet him. If nothing else, this proves that the Major has learned from his past mistakes, good quality for any leader. The Guardians, who have time travel and teleportation abilities via the Drydock, take a much more primitive Quinjet back down to Earth with the Avengers. Wonder Man and Martinex even discuss how the ship must feel like an antique, and oh no, Nikki's asking the Scarlet Witch how she doesn't get turned on all the time with Thor around. So inappropriate. Meanwhile, Vance stays behind, the sole crew member of Drydock. Okay, now for the man of the hour. The last time we saw Korvac, he was teleporting away after his plans were thwarted by Thor and the Guardians of the Galaxy. We know the Guardians caught up to him at least once, at which point he teleported through both time and space to Earth 616 of the late 1970s. It's here that Korvac discovered Galactus' space station. Fortunately for him, nobody was home at the time. Korvac is still focused on getting his vengeance on Earth, and he realized that stumbling upon such a place would allow him to fulfill that dream. Korvac needed to know more, so he hooked himself up to Galactus' ship and prepared to absorb as much knowledge as possible. The knowledge he acquired was as boundless as infinity. It was more than he ever thought possible, and in taking in so much knowledge, Korvac changed. Korvac's self became elevated, and soon Korvac left both man and machine behind and became a god. With his newfound power, Korvac's first and only self-directed thought was to adopt a new form, one more suitable for godhood, and thus no longer having to be the creature he had been forcibly turned into by the Badoon. And wouldn't you know, his suitable form to be a god happens to be male, white, blonde hair, rippling muscles. Who would have guessed? I'm not even gonna dwell. Elevated as he was, with newfound power, Korvac was no longer obsessed with petty ideas such as revenge. No, Korvac wanted more. Korvac wanted to heal all the injustice civilization had heaped upon the universe. To enact his plan, he needed to avoid suspicion while making subtle alterations in the fabric of reality. Thus, he returned to Earth to live what seemed a normal life. Our first glimpse of Korvac living a normal life is him watching a fashion show. The fact that he's wearing a full tux and is overdressed for the event doesn't go unnoticed. Korvac remains silent and still until the model Karina Walters walks out. Korvac doesn't know this, but Karina has chosen this form to feed Korvac's every desire. The Avengers who are present at the event are distracted by the street thug antics of the Porcupine. Korvac approaches Karina and makes her an offer without saying a word. The Porcupine is taken down quickly and without incidents, but it's still enough time for Karina to accept Korvac's offer, and for the two of them to depart unseen. Once back on Earth, the Guardians are anxious to get started on their mission to guard over young Vance, but as Nikki points out, to the surprise of no one, Starhawk has disappeared on another solo mission. At this time, Starhawk and his lover Alita both share the same body. It is as Alita that Starhawk comes to see Korvac. Karina answers the door, but Alita says that she wishes to speak to the master of the house. She's told she was expected. Alita claims that by showing up this soon, that therein lies the hope of the universe, and in a way she might be right, but Michael Korvac disagrees. Korvac insists that he is the hope of the universe. We learn here that Michael and Karina have gotten married when he refers to her as his wife. Korvac shows a great deal of awareness in calling Alita by her name and noting that he knows of her other form. Karina is dismissed from the meeting, but as she leaves, she can feel Korvac's warmth and caring protecting her. As soon as Karina leaves, Korvac confronts Alita, letting it be known that he can't let Starhawk spread knowledge of his existence. Alita gets pretty ballsy and puts it all on the line by stating that one of them will have to die. The hero and villain calmly greet each other and calmly face off against each other in the middle of the living room. Just like everybody knows that, hey, this is how this is supposed to go down. The battle that erupts takes place on every plane of existence. Starhawk manages to strike first, hitting him on both the physical plane and lashing out on the astral plane. As the fight rages on, Korvac points out that both of them already know the outcome of this battle. Starhawk denies it while Korvac takes his turn on offense, landing both enervating energy and physical blows. Starhawk attempts to attack once more, but Korvac shows him it's useless. He has won the physical contest against Alita, and on the other plane, Korvac subdues Starhawk in a bond of eldritch fire. Even with Starhawk's greatest struggle, he still can't undo the bonds that hold him. The battle was of such intensity that it snapped trees nearby and blew people over in the nearby vicinity. Peter Parker and Mary Jane noticed the disturbance. Doctor Strange detected a great upheaval in the fabric of reality. Captain Marvel's cosmic awareness could feel the fight, but was shielded from its location. And as Starhawk died, The Silver Surfer heard his death moan on the cosmic wind, and yes, Korvac kills Starhawk. Both Starhawk and Alita are reduced to dust. I think this may have been Starhawk's plan all along. Korvac assumes that their disruption was so small that nobody would be capable of ascertaining the source. With the one who knows out of his way, Korvac feels he can continue his plan undetected. In an effort to retain his secrecy, Korvac does an amazing feat. From the pile of dust, Korvac remakes Starhawk, molecule by molecule. He tells Starhawk to remember nothing of what took place here, and to return to the Guardians and convince them that protecting young Vance Astrovic from Korvac is the most important task to focus on. Around the time Korvac and Karina hooked up, the Avengers began to slowly disappear one at a time. The first of these to disappear was Two Gun. Hawkeye reported the event to Avengers Mansion. A day or so after this event, the former Avenger Quicksilver disappeared. Next is Captain America. A couple days later, Vision disappears. Enough Avengers are gone that this event is now their top priority. The Black Panther suggests asking for the Guardians' help. In the middle of this conversation, Hank Pym disappears. Two more Avengers report that Wanda vanished as well. The Guardians have kept watch over Vance and seemingly saved his life at least once when Charlie 27 stopped a truck from hitting Vance. Starhawk reflects that this shows that it was their destiny to be here and reminds everybody that they should just chill out here and keep an eye out for Korvac. They definitely should not be proactive and try to hunt him down. Meanwhile, Korvac continues to make preparations for the conflict to come. He's keeping an eye on all the players, watching both the Avengers and the Guardians. He set his chess pieces in play for the next stage of his plan. Some of the beings he needs to check on are so attuned in their watching that Korvac needs total concentration and asks Karina to leave him alone. Karina walks into her room and soon bursts into tears. She's an emotional mess and knows that in this moment she must either betray her father or her newfound love. She closes her eyes and reaches out to her father, the Collector. But in that moment, she hesitates. She stops. She reflects that perhaps she believes that Korvac is the rightful heir to the universe. Meanwhile, on the other side of the door, Korvac is checking the major players to ensure that none has become aware of his existence. The Watchers, the Greek gods, the Olympians, Mephisto, none have detected his presence. He then checks against perhaps the greatest presence of all, and no, even eternity is unaware of Korvac's schemes. At this moment, Korvac feels a disturbance. He barges in on his wife and forcibly makes her look into his eyes. The two gaze back and forth upon one another and find only love. Switching back to the Avengers, Vance has been capable of triangulating the place where all the missing Avengers have been transported to. With the use of Drydock's teleportation ability, they're going to use that now, he sends the 4 remaining Avengers there, post-haste. Upon their arrival, they discover that their teammates have been collected by the Collector. In the ensuing battle, the Collector incapacitates Thor when his hammer becomes stuck in one of the energy creatures of Erdal, and Thor himself is laid out by a direct blast from a positron cannon. Iron Man is taken out by a series of tiny missiles which emit a gas whose purpose was to freeze his metal joints. The Wasp mounts a one-woman assault, but she is taken prisoner by a flying disc which captures her in some electric netting. This means the only Avenger left standing is Hawkeye, and as the Collector reaches out for a weapon, Hawkeye fires his first shot and disarms him. The Collector flees, releasing a flying lizard behind him as he goes. The creature misses on its first pass at Hawkeye, and by its second pass, Hawkeye has a bullet arrow ready to take the creature out. Still, the Collector runs, this time dropping many small canisters behind him. The capsules explode and create a wall of flame between Hawkeye and his prey. Hawkeye escapes above with another arrow, He then uses another arrow to cut down some of the electrical wires, which he then uses to swing over before the Collector on a catwalk-sized bridge. This encounter is especially memorable because after having run out of gadgets, the Collector decides to defeat Hawkeye by using the power cosmic, and we learn a little bit more about the power. The Collector claims he hasn't used the power cosmic in eons, and states that at his age, he considers it a chore and resents being placed in such a position. He probably could have killed Hawkeye outright, but I'm sure he didn't want to damage the last Avenger he needed to finish his collection. Instead of killing him, the Collector attempts to wrap Hawkeye up in the metal from the bridge. In a final, desperate attempt to win the day, Hawkeye makes a final, wild shot with his bow that happens to land. The impact and electrical discharge is enough to temporarily disable the Collector. The Collector then blames his defeat on being weary and states that his portion of the power cosmic has been dimmed over time. Hawkeye frees the rest of the Avengers and they force the Collector to explain what is going on. And after more than 10 years, we finally get a little bit of background on the Collector. He gives us the following story. There is an elder, whose name is Tanalir Tivan. Once he had a wife and a child, but his wife lost her will to live and passed on. Tanalir, cursed with the gift of prophecy, he had seen far into the future and seen a power coming that would rival that of his fellow elders. This power's name was Thanos of Titan. Once Tanalir had observed this threat in the distant future, he went from one who passionately observed life to one who passionately collected life in hopes that if the universe died, he could save as much of it as possible. Thus, we have the Collector. Much to his surprise, the threat of Thanos was initially thwarted, and for a time, Thanos was destroyed. With the threat of Thanos removed, the Collector could see past that point in time whereby he saw another threat, a greater threat, and this time, he would do more than collect and prepare for the end of all things. This time he would interfere. When the time was right, he sent his daughter Karina to spy upon this new enemy. When we last left Korvac, him and Karina were gazing into each other's eyes and finding only love. Michael states that he sensed betrayal, but he sees only love. Katrina says that she does love him, but admits that it was she that tried to betray him because that's what she was sent here to do. But when the moment came to act, she just couldn't do it. He asks who sent her, and she tells him it was her father, the Collector, who discovered Korvac via his power of prophecy. She freely admits that her image was altered to be his perfect mate. Korvac then reaches out and finds the pocket of space her father's ship occupies. Michael restates his plan to bring peace to the world and that he cannot allow anybody to stop him. At the same time, the Collector's informing the Avengers that he was afraid his enemy might cause a war among the power of the cosmos, which would obliterate all reality. This is the reason he risked sending his daughter on such a dangerous mission. Vision asks if his enemy is known to them, and the Collector replies, yes, you know him as... And at that moment, Corvax strikes the Collector dead. It's rare in the pages of Marvel we see a character dropped in such a dramatic fashion, and yes, he's gone. The Collector is truly dead, and the Avengers are shocked. Vision immediately recognizes the danger of an enemy that can strike from so far away seconds before his identity is revealed. On Earth, Korvac lets his wife know that she is now an orphan. Iron Man and Vision both reach the same conclusion. They are most likely out of danger because if their enemy had wanted to, he could have attacked the Avengers as well. Iron Man suggests that they search the Collector's ship to see if there are any clues to who their enemy is, but Korvac was one step ahead of them and turned any relevant memory banks to dust. While looking for a way out, Iron Man finds a time machine and transports Two Gun back to his own time. As soon as that wraps up, Vision arrives with news that he's found the teleportation machine. We're not shown what happens next, but there were minor problems teleporting back. Wanda shows up midair and has to be rescued by Captain Marvel. Wonder Man arrives in front of a bus, and Hawkeye ends up on a flagpole. Back at the Forest Hills Estates, Michael can't seem to relax, so he comes upstairs to see his wife to find out what she feels. Karina says that she should hate Michael for killing her father, but that she would still betray him again given the chance. The two start kissing, and then they make love. Both of these beings hold at least some trace amount of the power cosmic. Their sex is transcendent in ways that we petty mortals can't imagine. As part of this experience, they seem to experience each other's lives. Meanwhile, the Avengers are having no luck tracking down who killed the Collector. Iron Man tries to call in some help from the Guardians, but Starhawk tries to remain true to his instructions and insists that his team maintain their stakeout of young Vance. Martinix insists that Starhawk help them out due to the assistance the Avengers have given their team. Reluctantly, Starhawk agrees to go. Meanwhile, Corvac is aware that Starhawk has been called to assist the Avengers. He hopes that Starhawk helps lead the Avengers away from him, otherwise he'll have to destroy them all. Starhawk arrives and Iron Man is ready to get down to work. Starhawk asks for the details and Iron Man tells him about the missing Avengers right up through the death of the Collector. Starhawk reminds Iron Man that he's more concerned about catching Corvac, but agrees to try to help. We now switch from Moondragon on the big screen to her own panel. Moondragon is stirred from meditation by a thought, and thus the puzzle begins to be solved. She asks Iron Man if he's had any luck in his search, and upon hearing there's a possibility, Moondragon declares that she will summon the others. Iron Man doesn't appreciate being passed by in the chain of command, but Moondragon leaves him little choice. Meanwhile, Hank and Jan are communicating with the ants, and they learn that there was a storm that came through and destroyed lots of anthills about a week ago. They receive Moondragon's mental summons and return at once to the mansion. Jocasta is out and she's discovering minute traces of ionization residue left all over from the release of a large amount of organic energy. She's trying to zero in on its location when suddenly she also responds to the Avengers' telepathic call. While flying through the universe, Captain Marvel uses the power cosmic to feel the fabric of the cosmos. What he notices is that somebody has been subtly altering the tides of existence. Before he can investigate further, he too is called back to Avengers Mansion. Once Moondragon has everybody together, she suggests taking the clues that each of them came up with and feeding them into the computer to find out what they all have in common. When Starhawk is asked what he found, he's the only one to respond with nothing. The rest of the clues are fed into the Avengers computer. After all the clues are processed, our heroes are surprised when the computer directs them to a house in Forest Hills Garden. Luckily, the home is in New York City. Unfortunately, the Avengers have had their security clearance rejected by the federal government and currently don't have access to Quinjets or any other mode of transportation. This brings up the ridiculous scenario where over 15 Avengers are standing around outside deciding how to catch a bus. Iron Man then commandeers an entire bus, forces the passengers to get out, and then leaves in a bus that has numerous characters that could have made the trip on their own. The Avengers make the short trip, and the humor continues as they exit the bus. A couple of the neighbors are worried about superheroes trashing the place. Hawkeye, on the other hand, only seems to be worried about dying from embarrassment from the Avengers' trip to the suburbs. You gotta love it when Iron Man knocks on the door and says, "I'm sorry to bother you, sir, but we've reason to believe that something in this house poses peril to the future of mankind." Corvac's a good sport about it all. He invites them in, but Starhawk looks puzzled about the whole encounter. Yellow Jacket and Wasp are sent to search the house, while Michael insists that they won't find anything. Moments later, they return to report just that. Hawkeye keeps laying the hate down hard on Iron Man, but he isn't done yet. He asks Moondragon, Captain Marvel, and Jocasta to use their mixture of psychic and cybernetic senses to probe for anything wrong. All three heroes come back blank. It's at that moment that Starhawk can't take it anymore. He demands to know who they're talking to because he doesn't see anybody there. The rest of the heroes gasp and make exclamations. They realize that if Starhawk was made blind so that he can't see him, then this must be their enemy. Korvac immediately owns up to his position as the enemy, and looks genuinely sad about it. Korvac tells Captain America that he was going to be more than a god. He was going to be their savior. Korvac then turns his back on the room to look out the window. He's taking one last look around at the world that could have been. Korvac wanted to remove all the cruelty and injustice from the cosmos, but he recognizes that the heroes are now determined to save themselves from his sane and benevolent rule. But now that he has been located, the universe will answer. In the calm before the storm, the first line of heroes debate if they should even attack an enemy who is just standing there with his back to them. Hawkeye suggests that they go ahead and attack, but Korvac cuts him short, stating that the Collector was right, and that soon much more powerful cosmic forces will move against Korvac. In order for Korvac's plan to work, he had to go unnoticed. That moment has passed. Whatever utopia he planned to bring us is no more. Korvac's new plan is to save himself. Korvac can see what the cards hold, so he goes on the offense and decides the Avengers should pay for meddling in his schemes. And here we are. This brings us to the final portion of this story arc. Michael's plan was dependent that his moves went unnoticed, but now that the Avengers have confronted him directly, he has garnered the attention of the cosmos. For the first time, he catches the eye of the all-seeing guard of Asgard. The Watcher suddenly becomes aware of Korvac's vast power, and worst of all, Eternity himself is aware of Korvac's presence. Korvac already knows. The might of the entire cosmos will not rest until he is destroyed. He and Karina could stand against the forces headed their direction, but doing so might destroy the entirety of the Earth 616 continuum. Korvac knows that these Avengers are but the first foot soldiers in what could become a very long war. Moondragon reaches out and sends a psychic summoning to the Guardians of the Galaxy. They then jump into a small craft they borrowed from the Avengers. Upon landing, the Guardians scare some of the neighbors, but are too focused on the task at hand to notice. When they arrive, Charlie doesn't hold back, and he bursts down the front door. For the first time, the Guardians stand before the enemy they have chased across space and time. Korvac lets them know that their arrival was rather foolish, as it won't change the outcome of events. Nikki seems to think that it might change if Vance teleports in to help. As a show of power, Korvac projects an image of Drydock. He then reaches into the air, and the entirety of Drydock explodes, including a screaming Vance Astro. Nikki becomes distraught about Vance and physically leaps towards Korvac's throat. Before she can land, Korvac tosses her against a wall, killing her instantly. Seeing an opening, Quicksilver barges in, sucker punching Korvac from behind. Korvac turns and Quicksilver is dead before he strikes the ground. While heroes die around her, Moondragon has realized something much more horrible. Several of our heavy hitters barge into Korvac all at once, but Korvac has no problems holding 5 heroes off at once. Charlie is the first to go down as he gets thrown against a wall. A full-scale strike of Thor's hammer fails to phase Korvac. Vision is the first to realize that their attacks simply aren't enough. Iron Man calls for a change in strategy and tells Black Panther to get Karina. Unfortunately, Black Panther sees this as an unhonorable order and decides to ignore the command. Fortunately, Hank Pym has no problem with hitting a woman and takes a leap at her. He notices that she isn't afraid of him at all. Meanwhile, Korvac doesn't understand why Karina isn't using her power cosmic to fight off her aggressors. Thinking she might be in trouble, Michael uses a blast to easily dispatch of Starhawk and Iron Man. Hank Pym threatens to fry the girl, but Korvac blows a hole in his chest. We then get this awesome panel of the two archers lined up together. It does little good, as Korvac tosses them both back through a wall. Miss Marvel flies in, but she is easily tossed to the side. Martin X, Black Panther, and Captain Marvel attempt to take Korvac on all at the same time. Martin X is the first to fall. Just as easily, he blows a hole through Captain Marvel, and finally takes down the Black Panther. All of this in a matter of 3 panels. In this final panel, Korvac starts to gush over Karina. He would have rather have slayed himself instead if not for his newfound love. None of these mortals, with the exception of Starhawk, could begin to understand what it means to be in love on a cosmic scale. Still, Korvac realizes that due to the conflict started here, that many forces will come forth to destroy him and their love. Captain America comes too, while Jocasta attempts her own ill-fated charge, and she too is destroyed. Thinking that Jocasta was the last of his enemies, Korvac lets his guard down for a moment. In that moment, Captain America uses his shield to attack. This is followed by a powerful uppercut. Captain America gets in another strike before Korvac comes to his senses, grabs Captain America's arm, and tosses him through a door. There are still Avengers ready to attack. Wonder Man comes at Korvac from behind, and suddenly he wonders if maybe the reason he was brought back from the dead was so that he could be a hero in this moment. He gets a few hits in on Korvac. As Korvac starts to get his energy back, Wonder Man claims he's not afraid anymore and leaps at Korvac, who returns the favor with a killer blast. Wonder Man might be down, but his attack has given 4 other Avengers time to get back on their feet. For a moment, they have Korvac staggered and are ready to hit him with a concentrated attack. Meanwhile, Moondragon has seen what it was that Korvac was trying to accomplish. She knows that his goals were righteous and pure, but she also knows that he can no longer complete those goals. Vision, Starhawk, Iron Man, and Thor hit Korvac with everything they've got, and Korvac reels. In this moment, besieged from 4 sides, Michael looks towards his love, Karina. Karina knows that in this moment, Korvac is looking to see if she's with him or against him. Amidst the destruction and bloodshed surrounding them, Karina finds herself torn and she hesitates. In that moment of hesitation, Korvac dies. Iron Man is quick to point out that it wasn't them, but rather something else that killed Korvac, and Starhawk agrees that they could not have won that battle. Iron Man is the first to point out that it seems as though he had abandoned life and lost his will to live. In that moment, Karina finally decides to tap into her store of the power cosmic. She's angry, and rightfully so. She takes her anger out on Starhawk first, whose previous fight with Korvac is what ended up giving Korvac's location away to the Avengers. With Starhawk out of the picture, she's left to face off against 3 Avengers and can't understand why they would show up to ruin Korvac's dream. The 3 of them attempt to rush her. Vision and Thor make contact, but Iron Man is blasted back. Once on the ground with her, the Vision increases its mass to immeasurable proportions to hold her in place. Even then, Karina easily throws Vision through the ceiling. The only ones left are Thor and Karina. Thor threatens her with death. In return, Karina taunts Thor, pointing out that his feet have got an unsteady sway and that the hammer trembles in his grasp. She said these things to get Thor as angry as possible. All at once, Karina is struck by Thor's hammer. Interestingly, Thor's hammer strikes out against his will. In her dying breaths, Karina reaches out for the hand of her lover. It is only now that we see Moondragon still observing the day's events. She informs Thor that the woman wished only to die. During the battle, Moondragon walked in the minds of both Michael and Karina. And now Moondragon shares the truth. Michael Korvac was not evil. He didn't want to rule over anybody or force them to do anything. All he wished to do was free them from the capricious whims of eternity. Thor asked her to explain. Would it have been better if the heroes lost? No, she responds, because once the heroes became aware of his interference, there was no way to stop the story. All the same, she can't help but feel that they are to blame for the death and destruction which surrounds them. Thor points out how callously Corvax struck them all down, but Moondragon had seen into his mind and knew that he had regretted killing them and that this was not an evil heart. What had killed Corvac was when he saw that Karina doubted him. At that moment, his heart was broken, and with the last of his strength he reached out with a power that surpassed even death and brought back to life all the dead and dying heroes. Some of those heroes were going to need a doctor if they were going to live much longer. It's then that Moondragon tells Thor that she knows his secret identity is that of physician Dr. Blake. Thor feels regret over what took place that day. He even stops to ask, can it be that Michael was just and we were the villains? Thor is genuinely afraid that he has innocent blood on his hands today. Moondragon points out that his patients need their doctor. He gets right to work, and Moondragon takes the steps to ensure that he will no longer remember what took place. In fact, she removes the memory of today's battle from all their minds, save a belief that once again they earned a great triumph. Thus Moondragon alone remembers Michael Korvac. Oh, but there is more. There is more Michael Korvac to come. But that's it for today. Thank you for watching Cosmic Comics. Feel free to hit any of the buttons below. I'm out.